All right, get ready, because we are diving deep today into one of the biggest American mysteries that are still unsolved, the Zodiac Killer.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a case that has fascinated true crime fans for like over 50 years.
Absolutely.
A real horror story
Yeah.
that happened right in front of everyone, with secret codes and scary threats,
Yeah.
and a killer who just disappeared.
Yeah.
We're here to try and understand what was going on in the mind of this mysterious person.
Right.
And we have a ton of research articles, even some personal notes to look through.
Okay.
Let's see if we can solve this mystery together.
It's just amazing to me how this case, after all these years, still feels so real and scary.
Right.
It makes you think about that basic fear we all have, the idea that someone could be hiding, watching, and picking their victims randomly.
Yeah, it's terrifying. The victims, David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Michael Mageau, Brian Hartnell, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein.
Wow.
Their stories and where they were attacked seem so different. Was the Zodiac really picking victims randomly? Or are we missing some kind of pattern here?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
That randomness, it just makes it so much scarier. Can you imagine living in the Bay Area back then, knowing anyone could be the next target?
Yeah.
It's like a horror movie, but it was real life.
Totally. And the Zodiac, he didn't just commit the crimes, he wanted to be a part of the story,
Yeah.
turning the whole thing into a sick game.
Yeah.
You've given me so much to read about the letters he sent to the press. They were scary. He demanded they publish them. He threatened more violence. He bragged about what he did.
It's true.
He even included codes,
Yeah.
saying they were the key to figuring out who he was.
Those codes, they were smart, even though they were scary.
Right.
He knew people loved puzzles and codes. He was controlling the story. He wasn't just a killer, he was like the director of a scary movie, playing with the media, the police, and everyone's fear.
Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. The first confirmed attacks. December 20th, 1968, Lake Herman Road. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, young couple, first date. Classic lover's lane turns into a nightmare. What stands out to you about this attack from all the research?
Well, the thing that really gets me is how brutal and quick it was.
Yeah.
Faraday was shot once, right in the head, like an execution. Jensen was shot 5 times as she tried to run. It tells me this killer was cold, he knew what he was doing.
And then a few months later, July 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau attacked in the Blue Rock Springs golf course parking lot. It seems like the Zodiac changed his style this time.
Yeah, he was much bolder. He blocked their car, blinded them with a bright light, then started shooting. Ferrin died, but Mageau lived, and his description of the attacker, white male around 5'8" to 5'10", stocky build, it gave us the first sketch of the Zodiac.
Right. And it's after this attack that the real psychological terror begins. Just weeks later, August 1st, 1969, those famous letters show up at 3 newspapers: the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner.
Yeah.
Each letter has part of that 408 character code and this chilling message. I like killing people because it is so much fun.
Oh, wow.
Why do you think the Zodiac sent these letters? Was it just to scare everyone, or was there something more?
I think it was a mix of things, you know? He wanted to be famous. He wanted to see his name, or, well, his symbol, printed in the paper. But he also wanted to show off how smart he was. He was challenging everyone, daring them to solve his puzzle.
And that puzzle was solved, amazingly, only a week after the letters were published. Donald and Betty Harden, a couple who were teachers, they cracked the code. What did that message reveal? And did it help the police get any closer to finding the Zodiac?
That message, it was just rambling, misspelled words, talking about collecting slaves for the afterlife. Didn't say who he was, but it gave us a look into his twisted mind. He wasn't just taking credit, he was saying there would be more killings. He wanted everyone to know he was dangerous and unpredictable.
And a month after the code is broken, he attacks again, and this time it's even worse, at Lake Berryessa, September 27th, 1969. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were having a picnic on a secluded island, and then this guy, dressed in a creepy costume, comes up to them. What do we know about this attack, and how is it different from the others?
This Lake Berryessa attack, it's like a whole new level of scary.
Yeah.
He wasn't just shooting people from the dark anymore. Now it's like a show, planned, and so much more cruel. He's not hiding, he wants to be seen.
Yeah, the sources say he was wearing this black hood, like an executioner, with sunglasses over the eye holes,
Wow.
and that symbol on his chest, the circle with a cross through it. It wasn't just a robbery, this was like a performance of terror.
Exactly. He told Hartnell and Shepard this made-up story about being an escaped convict needing their car. He even brought rope to tie them up, but it was all fake. He was there to hurt them, to scare them.
He stabbed Hartnell 6 times, and then Shepard 10 times. It's way more violent than the other attacks. It's like he enjoyed hurting them.
And the creepiest part is, after he attacked them, he just walked over to a payphone and called the police himself.
What?
The phone was still off the hook when they got there. It's like he wanted them to know he was in control, watching them try to catch him.
That's so scary. He was totally in control of the whole thing, and he keeps talking to the press, making everyone even more afraid.
Right. All those letters and codes he sent, he took credit for the Lake Berryessa attack, giving details only the killer would know. It's like a game, and he's winning.
And then, a few weeks later, he attacks again, October 11th, 1969. This time, it's Paul Stine, a taxi driver in San Francisco. It's the only confirmed Zodiac killing in the city. Does this attack fit with what we've seen before?
It's kind of different. It happened in the city, not a lover's lane or a parking lot, but it's still brutal. Stine was shot right in the head. And again, there's this weird, almost ritualistic part of the crime.
You mean how we took a piece of Stein's shirt?
Yes. He mailed it, covered in blood, to the San Francisco Chronicle with a letter saying he did it.
That's disturbing.
It's really sinister. Was he trying to say something with that?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Some people think it shows how powerful he felt. Like, he could kill someone in a crowded city and get away with it. Others think it was about getting attention, leaving his mark.
And there's another scary part of that letter. He said he was going to attack a school bus, pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. That seems like a big change, targeting anyone, not just couples.
Oh yeah, totally. It's a whole other level of scary. He's not just going after people in secluded places anymore, he's threatening kids. He wanted to create as much fear and chaos as he could.
But then things take another turn. We have these confirmed victims, but there are other cases that people have been talking about for years. What are some of the most interesting possible Zodiac victims, and what makes their cases so intriguing?
There are a few that really stand out. The murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards in 1963. A young couple shot on a beach near Lompoc, California.
Okay.
The attacker tried to tie them up before shooting them over and over. It's similar to the Lake Berryessa attack. Maybe this was the Zodiac, but younger, not as experienced.
And there's the murder of Cherry Joe Bates in Riverside, California, back in 1966. Brutally stabbed, almost beheaded. What connects this to the Zodiac, and why is it such a big debate?
What's creepy about the Bates case is what happened after. Letters are sent to the police and the newspaper saying someone killed her. The handwriting and the tone, they were kind of like the Zodiac's later letters.
Oh, wow.
There was even a note left at the crime scene. Bates had to die, there will be more.
You mentioned the handwriting. Didn't the police also find a poem carved into a desk at the Riverside City College library where Bates was studying? Some people think that handwriting could be the Zodiac's.
Right, that poem called Sick of Living, Unwilling to Die, people have been talking about it for years. Some handwriting experts think it's similar to the Zodiac's writing, others aren't so sure.
And then there's Donna Lass, who disappeared from South Lake Tahoe in 1970. She just vanished. What's different about her case, and why do some people think she was a Zodiac victim?
Well, a few months after she disappeared, the San Francisco Chronicle got this postcard that a lot of people think was from the Zodiac. It had pictures and letters, like a collage, showing a snowy scene with the words Sierra Club seeking victim 12. And the Zodiac symbol was right there in the address space.
And they recently identified a skull found in the Sierra Nevada mountains as Donna Lass.
Right.
It confirms she's dead, but we still don't know if the Zodiac was involved. Like, we get closer to the truth, but we still don't have the whole picture.
Exactly. And that mystery, all those unanswered questions, it's what keeps people interested even after all these years.
So we have the confirmed victims, the possible victims, and a killer who seems to be getting more violent and bold. But then, after 1974, he stops communicating. What do you think happened? Did he just disappear? Or is there more to it?
It's a real mystery. Why did he go quiet? Lots of theories, you know. Some say maybe he was in jail for something else, so he couldn't write letters anymore. Or maybe he died or got really sick.
But it's also possible that he just decided to stop, right? And we're left wondering, did he really disappear? Or is he still out there somewhere?
It makes it even scarier. The Zodiac, he was a real threat, but now he's like a ghost story.
Yeah.
A warning we whisper to each other in the dark.
And that ghost story makes people come up with all sorts of ideas. Over the years, so many suspects have come up, each one with clues that make you wonder.
It's true.
Your research talks about some of the most famous suspects. Let's start with Arthur Lee Allen. For a long time, it seemed like he was the one. What made him such a good suspect, and why did they rule him out?
Well, Alan looked like the descriptions some witnesses gave. He was smart, liked codes and ciphers, and even had a watch with that same Zodiac symbol on it.
Oh, wow.
And there were other weird things. He talked about having a bloody knife, and he said he read The Most Dangerous Game. That's kind of like what the Zodiac was doing.
And if I remember right, they found a Zodiac-style hood at his place and a typewriter that matched the one used to type some of those letters. They must have thought they had him.
Yeah, it seemed like it, yeah. But even with all that, they couldn't really prove it was him. His fingerprints didn't match any they found at the crime scenes. And the handwriting, well, it was close, but not a perfect match. Then, finally, they could test DNA from the back of the Zodiac stamps.
So they could finally connect him to the crimes? What happened?
The DNA didn't match Arthur Lee Allen. It wasn't him. That really messed up the investigation.
Wow.
Made a lot of people wonder if they'd ever find the Zodiac.
So if it wasn't Allen, who was it? You mentioned some other suspects. What about Richard Gaikowski, the journalist who worked for that counterculture newspaper in San Francisco when all this was happening?
Gaikowski had some mental health problems and had been violent before, and he looked like some of the sketches.
Okay.
And there's this recording the Vallejo Police Department analyzed. The dispatcher who talked to the Zodiac on the phone after the Blue Rock Springs attack, she thought Gaikowski's voice sounded familiar.
Huh, interesting.
It's not much, but it makes you wonder.
And then there's the theory that maybe it was Michael O'Hare, professor at UC Berkeley. This one gets a little, well, strange.
Yeah, that theory is all about the idea that the Zodiac was doing some kind of occult ritual.
Right.
The researcher who came up with this idea, he saw connections between where the attacks happened and symbols from ancient paganism.
Okay.
He thought O'Hare, because he knew about symbols and mythology, could have planned something like that.
But again, no real proof. Just another interesting idea that goes nowhere. And then there's Gary Francis Post, who's become a suspect more recently. What's different about him, and why don't the police seem to believe it?
Post's name came up because of this independent group called the Case Breakers. They said he looked like the Zodiac, that they cracked some codes that revealed his name, and even pointed to a scar on his forehead that matched what a witness said.
Interesting.
They think the police missed or even hid important evidence.
But the FBI and other law enforcement, they've said there's nothing real that connects Post to the Zodiac. It feels like we're always chasing shadows, trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces.
It's frustrating, but that's also what makes it so fascinating. The Zodiac has become this symbol of our obsession with the unknown, the dark side of people. It reminds us that some mysteries might never be solved, but we keep looking for the truth, trying to understand.
So after going so deep into the Zodiac Killer case, all the evidence, the theories, the stories of the victims, what's the most important thing to take away? What should our listeners think about as they try to understand this scary story?
I think the most important thing to remember is that behind the mystery, the codes, the headlines, there were real people whose lives were destroyed by these crimes. The victims and their families, they deserve justice, closure, and to be remembered. The Zodiac, he might have wanted to be remembered as some mastermind, someone who controlled everyone with fear, but let's remember him for what he was, a killer who hurt innocent people.
That's a really important point. The Zodiac case, with all its twists and turns, its unanswered questions and lingering fear, it still has a hold on us. It's a story that speaks to our deepest fears, our fascination with the dark side of life, and our need to understand even the things that don't make sense. So to our listeners, if this deep dive has made you want to know more, I encourage you to keep exploring. There's so many books, documentaries, websites, all about trying to figure out who the Zodiac Killer was.
And maybe, just maybe, someone out there has the missing piece. Maybe a forgotten memory, a hidden clue, a chance meeting will one day tell us who the Zodiac Killer really was. Until then, the mystery continues, a reminder that some shadows never really go away.